She didn't even look up. That was the most devastating part of it. Not the words, not the sneer, not the practiced way. Serena swept her French manicured nails across the kitchen counter as though brushing away crumbs. It was the eyes. The fact that she couldn't even be bothered to lift them from her phone. When her younger sister walked into the room carrying a notebook full of hand-drawn sketches, price calculations scrawled in pencil, and 3 months of dreams pressed flat between the pages, Serena was scrawling something trivial, probably a sale alert from an Italian shoe brand that had her name on its wait list only because their family money had gotten there first. Maya, she said, and the way she said the name alone was its own sentence, its own verdict. Please tell me you didn't take the afternoon bus here, just to show me this. Maya stood at the edge of the kitchen island, 23 years old, wearing a jacket that had seen 3 winters and would see 3 more holding the notebook like a small shield. She already knew wouldn't protect her. She had taken the afternoon bus. It had cost her 2 hours and 40 minutes and a seat next to a man. With an extraordinarily large quantity of luggage, she had rehearsed her pitch the entire way, whispering the numbers under her breath, practicing the tone, not begging, not demanding, just presenting the way she'd read. Successful people did it, just a clean, honest presentation of something she believed in. It's a food delivery concept, Maya said. But specifically for I know what it is. Serena finally looked up, and there was something almost theatrical in the slowness of it, the way a judge might lift their eyes from a paper, already stamped with a ruling. You want to build an app for delivering home-cooked meals, made by, what did you write here? Verified local grandmothers. She put the notebook down with a soft, insulting gentleness. The way one sets down something fragile and cheap. Maya, be serious. I am serious. You're 23, and you've never held a job for longer than 8 months. Serena picked up her phone again. The conversation in her mind was already over. You don't have capital, you don't have connections. And you barely have a CV. That's why I came to you. I need a seed investment. I've broken down the numbers right here. If you just look at the I'm not your bank, a soft laugh, not cruel enough to be a weapon which somehow made it worse. It was just dismissive. The laugh one gives a child who announces they want to be an astronaut. And honestly, even if I were, I wouldn't invest in this. The market you're targeting doesn't have purchasing power. Old women cooking in their kitchens. That's not a product. That's a charity case. And the tech side alone would eat you alive. You have no idea what you're talking about. Maya felt the rehearsed sentences dissolve. Not into anger, she had expected pushback, had prepared for skepticism, but into something quieter and more humiliating, the sudden vertigo of having your reality described by someone else's contempt. And finding yourself for just one moment, almost believing them you're always like this, she said, and her voice was very steady. Every time I've tried something, every time you've tried something, you've quit. Serena set down her phone again, and this time her gaze had an edge to it. Something sharp under the boredom. She was wearing a silk blouse, the color of champagne. She had a meeting later with investors of her own, real investors, the kind who wore watches that cost more than Maya's year of rent. I'm not being cruel, I'm being honest. There is a difference. You're a dreamer. There's nothing wrong with that, but dreamers need to know their lane. She paused. Let that land, yours is in business. She picked up her bag. Italian leather. The kind with a tiny gold clasp that made a sound like a small, unsatisfied verdict, and walked to the door. Go find a nice stable job, Maya. Something with a salary. Let the people who understand this world handle the building. She glanced back once briefly as though checking that the notebook was still on the counter and not following her leave the notebook. I'll throw it away for you. Save you the trouble of carrying it back on the bus. The door closed. Maya stood in the expensive kitchen for a long moment. She looked at the notebook. She picked it up, she put it in her jacket. She walked back to the bus stop in the early evening heat, and she did not cry, which was either strength or a kind of numbness. She'd learned to mistake for strength, and she was not yet sure which she did not quit. That is the important part of this story, the part that the people who heard it later always found most improbable because we are trained by 1,000 bad narratives to believe that setbacks are the story's climax, that the moment of rejection is where the protagonist either crumbles or roars. But Maya did neither. She went home, she revised the notebook, she found a tech co-founder through an online forum who believed in the concept enough to work for equity. She applied for a small business grant she'd read about in a government pamphlet. She'd picked up at the post office while mailing something else entirely. She got it not enough to be comfortable, just enough to begin. Meanwhile, Serena built her own empire, as she called it, which was, in fact, an import business dealing in mid-range, European homeware, the kind of enterprise that looks glamorous on social media and functions on a knife edge of over-leverage. She had the connections, she had the polish, she had the access to rooms that Maya would never have been invited into. And she moved through those rooms with the specific confidence of someone who has never been seriously told no by anyone whose opinion she respected. She hired well. She spent lavishly on appearances. Her office had an espresso machine from Switzerland and a receptionist who had been selected among other criteria for the quality of her presentation because Serena believed sincerely and without embarrassment that beautiful offices produced beautiful results. She did not think about her sister. This is also important. It was not that she had forgotten Maya. She hadn't entirely, but that she had filed her away with the comfortable certainty of someone who believes. The story is settled. Maya was the younger sister who didn't quite understand the world. She had probably found a job by now, something decent enough. Maybe she'd even started a small catering operation, the kind that runs out of a home kitchen and serves children's birthday parties. That was fine. That was appropriate. People found their level. What Serena did not account for, what the extraordinarily self-satisfied never account for, is that levels move the first 3 years. Maya's company almost didn't survive. 4 separate times. She knows the exact number because she has thought about it since. Has turned those moments over the way you turn a stone to find what lives beneath it. The first time was a cash flow crisis in month 7 that required her to personally call every single registered cook on their platform and ask for a 3-week payment delay. A conversation she described later as the most terrifying thing I have ever done while pretending to be calm. The second was a competitor entering the market with venture capital funding that made their budget look like a single line item on someone else's spreadsheet. The third was a press article that questioned their food safety practices based on a single unverified complaint, which required 2 weeks of crisis management and a transparency audit that cost them more money they didn't have. The fourth was personal, a falling out with her co-founder that she has never discussed publicly and likely never will, except to say that it required her to restructure the company overnight and assume roles she had not been trained for and had to learn while performing. She learned them by year 4. Home Table, which was the name she'd given the company, the same name that was in that notebook. The one Serena had offered to throw away for her was operating in 7 cities. By year 5, they had over 3,000 registered home cooks, a logistics partnership with a major delivery conglomerate, and a Series B funding round that earned a paragraph in a prominent business magazine, not the cover, a paragraph. Maya had framed it anyway and put it on the office wall because she believed in acknowledging small victories in order to understand large ones. By year 7, the paragraph had become the cover, and still her sister did not call, which was fine because Maya was busy. She had a company to run, one that had by that point generated employment for over 12,000 people. If you counted the cooks, the drivers, the tech team, the operations staff across 7 regional offices, she had a team of 42 inches. The central office alone, including a director of partnerships, whose job among other things, was to field acquisition inquiries from larger platforms that had started to notice that HomeTab's user retention metrics were by any reasonable standard extraordinary. Something about the product, about the particular warmth of receiving a meal made by a real person in a real kitchen, labeled with that person's name and their neighborhood.
I can do this.
And a small handwritten note about what inspired the dish that day had created a loyalty that the big platforms with the algorithmic efficiency and the venture capital urgency found difficult to replicate and increasingly urgent to acquire Serena's company during this same period, had grown and contracted and pivoted and restructured in the way that businesses built on elegance rather than fundamentals often do. She had expanded into markets she didn't fully understand, pulled back at the wrong moment from ones she did, and made 3 acquisitions that looked excellent in press releases and performed considerably less excellently. In practice, by year 6, she was managing a debt load that required a level of financial acrobatics she had not previously needed. By year 7, the acrobatics had begun to fail. The details of the collapse are not the point. The point is that it happened as these things do in 2 phases, slowly and then all at once. The slowly phase lasted about 18 months and involved a series of restructuring conversations with creditors, a significant reduction in staff, the closing of the Swiss espresso machine office, and the quiet, deeply private humiliation of selling assets that had once been symbols. The all-at-once phase lasted about a week, at the end of which, Serena found herself in possession of a company that was technically still operating, but which required an immediate infusion of capital or would not be operating for much longer. She had called in every favor she had. She had sat across tables from people whose expressions remained professionally sympathetic. While their eyes communicated a more honest verdict, she had revised her projections until the revisions began to feel dishonest. And then she had stopped. Because even in crisis, Serena had a certain vanity about her intelligence, a refusal to become someone she despised. It was her financial advisor, a careful man named Marcus, who had managed her account for 11 years and who delivered difficult truths with the pained courtesy of someone who has practiced the delivery for decades, who said the name "there is one more option." He said, "I don't know if you want to consider it." "Tell me," she said, "Home." Table is in discussions with 3 companies right now about a strategic acquisition. One of those companies is a logistics conglomerate you've spoken with before, but the other 2 are in adjacent spaces. And one of them, he paused a pause with texture to it. One of them is a homeware and lifestyle import business mid-range, European focus. Their CEO has been quite public about wanting to expand into the food and experience vertical. Serena's chest went very still. The business development contact who reached out to my office. Marcus continued mentioned that the CEO would be attending the Business Innovation Summit next week, the session on consumer platform growth. Apparently, she's presenting a case study. Another pause. "I thought you should know before you attend, given that you've registered." The silence stretched across his office. "I like something physical." "What is the CEO's name?" Serena asked, and even as she asked, she understood that she already knew, because there is a particular species of dread that arrives not as surprise, but as confirmation. The dread of a thing you have half known for some time, finally stepping into the light. Marcus looked at her carefully. "Maya," he said, "I believe she's your yes." Serena said she is. The Business Innovation Summit was held at a grand waterfront hotel, the kind of venue that announces itself through architecture before it announces itself through anything else. The sweep of glass along the water of the lobby with its 12 m ceilings, and the particular silence that expensive spaces purchase through the thickness of their carpets and the training of their staff. Serena had attended this summit 4 times before. She had presented at it twice. She knew which breakout sessions had the best catering and which networking lunches were worth staying for. And she had always moved through this building with the unhurried authority of someone Who belongs in a place so thoroughly that belonging is no longer a thought she needs to have today? She arrived 40 minutes early and felt for the first time in this building like a visitor. She had dressed carefully. This is worth noting. Not as vanity, though. Vanity was certainly present, woven into every choice she made before a mirror, but as psychology when the architecture of one's confidence and has been damaged. One reinforces the exterior. She wore the charcoal blazer she'd bought in Milan 2 years ago. The one that had cost enough to make even her pause before the credit card cleared. Her heels were Italian. Her bag was the same gold class one from the kitchen scene 7 years ago, maintained with the obsessive care of someone who keeps symbols alive long past their practical usefulness. Because symbols are sometimes all that remains, she looked to any outside observer exactly as she had always looked composed, expensive, formidable. She felt like a stage set. The session began at 10 inches. The grand ballroom, which seated 400 and was very nearly full. Serena took a seat near the aisle, not in the front where she would have sat before, but not in the back, either a middle row that felt like a compromise. Like so many things in her life, currently felt the moderator opened with the customary remarks about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the encouraging statistics about startup growth, the obligatory optimism that these events require like oxygen. Serena barely heard it. She was watching the stage, and then the moderator said the name, and Maya walked out. Serena had, of course, seen photographs. The business magazine cover had been unavoidable. Marcus had practically placed it in front of her. Like evidence, she had looked at the photograph of her sister, standing in what appeared to be one of home tables, regional kitchens, surrounded by women of various ages in matching aprons, and she had felt something complicated enough that she had put the magazine face down and not examined the feeling too closely. But photographs are a negotiation with reality. They can be contextualized, minimized, filed away into a corner of the mind, where inconvenient truths go to wait. Walking onto a stage in front of 400 people, Pink is not a photograph. Maya was 30 years old. She wore a dark navy suit that was well made. Without being ostentatious, the choice of someone who has learned to dress for authority rather than for attention. Her hair was pulled back. She carried nothing, no notes, no portfolio, no laptop, and the confidence of that emptiness, the absolute willingness to stand in front of a room and speak from memory and conviction. It struck Serena in a place she had not expected to be struck. She remembered the girl with the jacket and the notebook. She remembered the boss. She remembered the words she had said with such comfortable certainty. Dreamers need to know their lane, and the memory arrived now, not as a recollection but as a verdict, delivered at last to the person who had originally issued it. Maya spoke for 35 minutes. Serena would not be able to recall all of it. Afterward, her mind had a tendency during those 35 minutes to keep sliding sideways into that kitchen. 7 years ago, into the quality of her own voice saying, "Leave the notebook. I'll throw it away for you," into the specific satisfaction she had felt. Closing that door, the righteous efficiency of it, the clean line she'd drawn between her own serious future and her sister's hopeless present, the mind, when confronted with the evidence of its own profound wrongness, tends to keep returning to the crime scene, pressing on the bruise, trying and failing to understand how the confidence calculation had been so completely, so devastatingly incorrect. What she did here clearly and in full. It was the section on origin. People ask me what the idea was. Maya said from the stage, and her voice had a quality to it that Serena did not recognize, a steadiness that was not performed. Not the strategic calm of someone managing an impression, but the genuine equilibrium of someone who has been through enough. That equilibrium is no longer an act. They want a clean story. The eureka moment, the garage, the late night, to the sudden flash of genius. She paused. My origin story is less cinematic. Someone I trusted told me. The idea was worthless. Told me the people I wanted to serve. didn't have purchasing power told me to find my lane. Another pause and something moved across her face. Not anger, not triumph. Something more considered than either. I think about that conversation a lot. Not because it was cruel, it wasn't not intentionally, but because I nearly believed it. I spent 2 hours on a bus home almost convincing myself that the people who speak with the most confidence must be the ones who are right.
Maya.
And I think that is
Serena.
one of the most dangerous thoughts a person can have. The room was
Serena.
quiet. In the particular way that rooms get quiet, when something true has been said in public.
Serena,
In the
I
cooks
heard
on
your
our platform,
presentation.
Maya continued 12,000 of them. Now,
And
they were
I-
told the same thing their whole lives.
I just don't
that their
think-
skills were not a product, that what
saw
they
you in
made
the
in their
audience.
kitchens every day was not valuable. In the way that the world
Serena.
measures value, that their lane was the kitchen. Yes. But not the kind of kitchen that generates revenue or commands
I need
respect.
to speak with
She
you
looked out at
about
the
the
audience
acquisition.
with a directness that Serena found physically difficult to hold. We now know that was wrong.
I know why
We
you're-
know it in
My
the
team
numbers.
sent the outreach
We know
fray.
it in the retention data,
I asked them to
which is the
include your
highest in
company
our
in the
category,
list.
by a margin that still
You asked them
surprises our
to.
investors. Every
I
quarter
never
we
thought
know
Maya
it
would
because
do that.
people are hungry. Not just for food, but
I've
for
known
something
about
that
your
feels like
situation
it
for
was
about
made
4
with
months.
actual care.
I
By an
followed- I
actual
didn't
human
engineer it,
being who
Brett.
actually
I didn't
exists.
arrange the
A
crisis
slight
came.
smile turns out
I'm not
that has
interested in that kind of
enormous
story.
purchasing power. Warm laughter from the
Then
audience.
why?
The recognizing kind, the kind that comes from a room full of people who have either lived the
Why?
thing being described or done the describing to someone else. Serena did not laugh.
Serena,
She sat very still,
I see you
and the
now.
blazer that had cost enough to make her pause felt suddenly and precisely like a
Because you're
costume
my
worn to the
sister.
wrong occasion after the session ended.
Your
There was the
distribution
usual surge of the
relationships in the
crowd,
homeware and
the
lifestyle
networking
space
instinct,
are exactly
activating the
what we
business
need for the
cards
home living vertical
materializing,
we're building.
the brief
This
and
isn't
intense
charity.
clustering around the speaker that these events always
I want
produce.
to be very clear about
Serena sat in her chair for a moment longer than she needed to, watching from across the room. As Maya was
You
surrounded by
chose
people
me.
who wanted things from her attention,
After
her
all
endorsement,
this
her
time,
partnership, her
you
time,
chose me.
she watched the man she recognized as the CEO of a major regional logistics firm approach with the careful deference that powerful people reserve for people they consider more powerful. She watched her sister receive
I'm
this
sorry
with a naturalness
for what
that
I said
suggested
tough
it had become over years
7 years
and
ago.
through considerable suffering,
Road.
simply the texture
In
of
the
her
kitchen.
days. Then
I was
Maya
so
looked up
certain.
across the room through the
I was
crowd,
certain in
and the
way people
noise
are
and
certain
7
when
years
they've
of
confused
accumulated
confidence with
silence.
knowledge.
The sisters' eyes met.
I
What
said
happened in
things
that
that I have
moment is
thought
difficult to
about since,
describe with the
more than
precision
you
it
probably
deserves.
know.
It was not a dramatic freeze. The
I am
world
so
did not
sorry.
stop. The crowd did
I
not
truly
part.
didn't mean to hurt
There
you.
was
The
no
notebook
cinematic
tang.
swell of music, no theatrical recognition scene. It
I
was
told you
simply
I'd throw
two
it
women
away.
looking at each other across a room.
I still
One of them
haven't.
having arrived here through a story, whose shape the other was only now fully and without negotiation beginning to understand. Serena stood up. She was not sure what she intended to do. Her legs moved and she followed them. The
The
way
offer is
one
real.
does in
Take it to
moments when the
Marcus and review
conscious
it without
mind has
pressure.
run out
And
of
I want you to come for
strategies
dinner this
and the
weekend.
body takes over with its own older, humbler knowledge. She moved through the crowd, and the crowd moved around her, and she noticed with a strange detachment that no one here recognized her in the way they had once recognized her. No one turned to greet her, no one oriented toward her. The way a room orients toward its gravitational center and the absence of that orientation, which she had been experiencing for months now, in various forms struck her here with a freshness that it was almost physical, almost like a second door closing. She stopped 3 feet from her sister Maya, had finished her conversation with the logistics CEO, who had moved away with the look of a man who has successfully begun something promising. She was holding a glass of water, not wine, just water. And she looked at Serena with an expression that was. And this is what Serena would think about most. In the
I needed
months
that
that
moment.
followed almost entirely, without
Now,
satisfaction,
let's go.
no triumph, no vindication performed for an audience. No carefully
I used to
prepared
think this was
speech,
everything.
delivered into the moment that had been building for 7 years. Just her sister's face older, now carrying the particular quality of feature that sustained difficulty and sustained purpose.
Time to just
Both produce a kind of density like wood that has been in weather and is stronger for it. Serena, Maya said. Serena opened her mouth. She realized no prepared language for this moment. She had prepared language for investor meetings and crisis negotiations, and the uncomfortable conversations with creditors, and had rehearsed those sentences in the car on the way here, but she had not prepared language for this, because some part of her had believed with the magical thinking of the desperate that it would not come to this exact configuration. Her sister, the stage, the room full of people who had just spent 35 minutes inside the story of everything Serena had dismissed out of hand. I heard your presentation. She said finally the words felt inadequate to the point of near uselessness. She knew it. She said them anyway. Because inadequate beginnings are still beginnings. And she had run out of better options. I saw you in the audience, Maya said. A pause that lasted longer than pauses usually last. I need to speak with you, Serena said. About the acquisition discussions Marcus mentioned that Home Table is currently. I know why you're here, not unkind, not dismissive. Simply clear, in the way that people become clear when they have been through enough confusion to have. Learned the value of its opposite, my team. Sent the outreach. I asked them to include your company in the list. Serena said you asked them too. Yes, you knew. I've known about your situation for about 4 months. Maya said, I follow the industry. It's my job to follow the industry. She set down her water glass on the table beside her. I didn't engineer it, if that's what you're wondering. I didn't arrange the crisis. I'm not interested in that kind of story. Then why Serena stopped? She could feel something happening in her chest. Something she did not have a clean word for. Not quite shame, not quite grief. Something that encompassed both, without being reducible to either something that had no entry in the vocabulary she had spent her entire adult life carefully curating. Why did you include me? Maya looked at her for a long moment. Long enough that Serena felt the full weight of being seen by someone she had once refused to look at properly. Because you're my sister, she said. And because the business case is genuinely strong, your distribution relationships in the homeware and lifestyle space, we are exactly what we need for the home living vertical. We're building this isn't charity, a slight pause, deliberate and important. I want to be very clear about that. This is not charity. Serena understood. The understanding arrived completely without stages, the way certain understandings do not build toward, but simply present all at once. Like a room when the light comes on. This was not rescue. This was not the younger sister. Extending mercy to the older one, lifting her up with the theatrical generosity of someone who has been waiting for the moment to reverse the hierarchy. This was a business proposition, offered on the same terms. Maya offered any business proposition assessed on its merits stripped of performance. The fact that sentiment existed on both sides was real, and they both knew it. But it was not the foundation of the offer. The foundation was competence. The offer stood because Maya had built something valuable enough that she could choose her partners, and she had looked at the available options and chosen among them this one. Not because of the kitchen 7 years ago, but in full awareness of it. That was Serena's thought either. The most generous thing anyone had ever done for her, or the most demanding. Possibly it was both. Possibly those things were far more often than she had previously understood the same. I'm sorry, she said. The words came out before she had finished deciding to say them, which is sometimes how the truest things are said, not chosen, but recognized already formed. I'm waiting in some part of you that is more honest than the part that manages impressions. For what I said 7 years ago in the kitchen, her voice did not break, but it changed things slightly, to the way voices do when the weight they are carrying becomes briefly visible to the person carrying it. I was so certain. I was certain in the way that people are certain when they've confused confidence with knowledge. And I said things that I have thought about since more than you probably know. Maya was quiet, the notebook. Serena said, I told you I'd throw it away. I still have it. Maya said something crossed Serena's face. Then the full impact of it arriving at last, with the unhurried precision of consequences that have been traveling toward you for years. The notebook in the jacket pocket, the boss. The 2 hours of rehearsed sentences that had dissolved the moment they met. a door closing in their face. The
Welcome to
girl who
Home
had
Table.
come with something
I'm honored
real
to be
and
here.
been handed back
This
a
notebook-
dismissal so comfortable and complete that it hadn't even required eye contact. She
I
had been
understand
so
what this
sure.
means,
She had
and
been
I
so
won't let you
entirely,
down.
catastrophically, irreversibly sure,
Thank you.
and the sureness had cost her not the
Together,
business,
we
not
can
primarily,
restore what was
but
lost
7 years of her sister, which
and
is a
build
cost
something
that
even
does not
stronger.
appear on any balance sheet and cannot be recovered by any restructuring or strategic acquisition, no matter how favorable the terms.
It's
The
been a
offer
long
is
time
real.
coming, hasn't it?
Maya said after a moment, I
necessary
want you to
step,
look at the term
completed.
sheet properly. Don't decide today.
acquisition is complete,
Take it to Marcos
This
and
marks a
review
new
it
chapter.
without pressure.
Indeed,
She
Maya.
paused.
Congratulations.
And I
This
want
is
you
so
to come for
good.
dinner this
I
weekend,
know, I miss
not
this.
to talk about
Me
the
too.
acquisition, just
I'm
dinner.
so happy to have you
Serena
here.
looked at her sister, the
Thank
woman
you,
who had walked
truly.
onto that stage in front of 400 people and
We
spoken
built
for
this together.
35 minutes
We
without
built
notes,
Home Table
who had
because
built a
every
company
lane
from a
deserves a
notebook and a
path to
bus
the
ride,
biggest kitchen in the
and a government pamphlet picked up at the post office who had survived 4 near deaths, and a co-founder crisis, and a press attack, and a competitor with infinite funding. And who was standing here now,
belong up here,
not with the
Serena.
posture of victory, but with something
Thank you,
quieter
Maya.
and more durable than victory, with the posture of someone who has done the work and knows it and
From a
requires
notebook
no
on a bus
audience to
to
confirm
this.
it. Yes, Serena said to both. Now, listen
full
and listen
distance.
well. Because this is the part the griot was always going to arrive at, the part that lives beneath the story. Like the root lives beneath the tree, like the heat lives beneath the surface of ground that has been in sun all day. We like to think the lesson here is about success, about the
Together,
underdog,
we are the strength
rising
of Home
about the
Table.
satisfying
Thank you for
reversal of
making this
fortune that
community.
rewards the
Cheers and
humble
applause.
and humbles
To
the
every
proud.
cook,
And
every
yes,
driver.
those
This is
things
what
are
not
in this
discarding
story.
something looks
They
like.
are real. The
This is what
notebook
not
is real.
quitting looks like.
The boss is real. The cover of the magazine is real. Do not let anyone tell you that the material shape of vindication is not worth acknowledging, because it is, and Maya has earned every line of it with the specific, unglamorous, uninstagrammable currency of sustained effort over time. But that is not the deepest lesson. The deepest lesson is about the catastrophic cost. Not of mistaking
not
the
be the
wrapper for
one
the
who closes
contents.
the door.
Serena looked at her sister
future
and
awaits.
saw a jacket that had seen 3 winters, a notebook full of pencil calculations, an afternoon boss, and a name that had never appeared in the rooms she moved through. And from
I
these
remember
things,
writing this.
she constructed a verdict
felt
so
impossible
complete
then.
and so comfortable that she delivered
Look
it
at us
without
now.
hesitation, without curiosity, without even the basic intellectual courtesy of looking up from her phone. She never considered that the wrapper might
We know
contain
what was
something she could not
lost.
see. She never considered that confidence and knowledge
But
are
look
different
at what we are
instruments
building.
that happen sometimes to make similar sounds. She never considered that the woman standing
Good
at
morning,
the edge
everyone.
of her
Thanks
kitchen
for getting here
island
early.
might
Good
in the
morning.
fullness of time
Let's jump
be
right into the
standing on a
Q3 report.
stage
We
that
have a-
Serena could only watch from a middle row. She lost 7 years of her sister. Not the business, the sister. The acquisition
remember
may
this
proceed,
stop.
or it may not. The term sheet
time.
will be negotiated.
The
These
data
things
here
are
shows
what they are,
significant growth,
and the world will
validating our
continue to
strategy.
turn
Yes,
on its
exactly. I'm
commercial
noting that
axis
down now.
regardless.
Perfect.
But
With this-
7 years of a relationship, 7 years of meals, not shared of milestones, not witnessed of the ordinary dailiness. A circle of sisters knowing each other as they change those years do not appear on any balance sheet and cannot be
every single
recovered
one
by
of you,
any deal,
this
however
isn't just a
generously
milestone,
structured.
it's our
That is the
shared
cost that the
victory.
arrogant never account for. Because the
best time to see a
arrogant
person
are
clearly
always
is before you have
working
decided
from
you already
incomplete
have.
data and
The
too
second
proud
best
to
time
admit the
is now.
incompleteness, and the item they most consistently fail to include in their calculations is the one labeled, "What I might be wrong about Maya." Carried the notebook. That is the whole of it. If you need the
truth is not
whole
a
of it
lesson to
in
learn,
one image,
but a
when
life to
someone
live.
told her that the thing
I
she
made a
had
promise
made
to
was
myself on that
worthless,
bus.
she did not discard it.
It's
She
in
put
the
it in her
display case
pocket,
now.
and she walked back to the bus stop, and she kept going. Not out of stubbornness, or not only stubbornness, but out of a specific quiet form of knowledge that the powerful so rarely possess. The knowledge of not yet the
This
knowledge
dish,
that a
it
thing
reminds me of
unmeasured
home.
is not
And that's
therefore
why we're
without
doing
value.
this.
The knowledge that the people most certain of the world's shape are often the last to notice. when the world is reshaping itself around them, quietly, persistently in notebooks on afternoon buses. The notebook had 12,000
We
names in
see
it.
you.
Now, in a manner of
Your
speaking,
work has
12,000
value.
people cooking in their
We know
kitchens,
your name.
whose worth had been
I'm
declared
glad we finally got
negligible
through to each
by
other.
people who didn't bother to
Me
look
too,
properly,
Serena.
who
It
had
makes
been
all the
seen truly,
difference.
practically,
Oh
transformatively
my.
seen by a
It's
girl
from
who
a home
refused to
table
believe a
cook.
verdict delivered
Thank
by someone
you.
who hadn't done the reading. Do
This
not be the one who closes the door. Or if you
I
have
was
been,
wrong.
and nearly all of us
Without
have been in
asterisks,
ways large and
without
small,
excuses.
in
Like
kitchens
this.
and
Oh, I
boardrooms
see
and
now.
family
That's
dinners
perfect.
where we
Just like
wielded our
grandma's.
certainties like
This is
expensive
wonderful.
accessories,
Thank you.
then
Morning,
learn to
team.
do what
Hi,
Serena, to
Maya.
her real
Hello,
and
good
permanent
morning.
credit, eventually learned to do to stand before the person
See,
whose
Maya.
notebook you once offered to discard. And to say I was wrong,
Good morning.
and to mean it without asterisks or
Morning,
qualifications,
Maya.
or the subtle
The
repositioning
world
that passes
reshapes
for
itself
apology
around the
among the
people with
proud, to
notebooks on
understand that
afternoon
arriving at that
buses.
sentence too late is not the same
The
as never
climb was
arriving at
hard,
all, to understand that the
but the
door you
view.
closed is not the only door, and that the person you dismissed may. If you are very fortunate and not too late, choose to open another one. The best time to see a person clearly is before you've decided you already have. The second best time is now.